Welcome back, artists. I'm Waiya Paints, and I said yes, and 3DX Files became today's sponsor. Now, Amanaman is more of a traditional mini, something I haven't painted in a while for this channel. So I'm looking at this as more of a sci-fi snack of a project. And I hope you find it as tasty as I did. But no time for dilly-dally. Meet me over at the painting table. I'm gonna grab my brushes. Let's get started. For Amanaman here, I'm planning on using some contrast paint to give him a base to start from. So while priming in black is the norm for me, today I'll need a Zenithal highlight for the contrast to filter on. And if you've never done this due to not having an airbrush, you can totally pull this off with a rattle can primer. Starting over black, I sprayed the main body with a gray primer at about a 45-degree angle in relation to the ground. The idea here is to gray up all of the horizontal surfaces of the body while avoiding the underhanging areas. This is going to establish the lighting for the midtone and act as the foundation for our highlights as an undercoat. Be sure to also pass over the top of the model as well. It will be covered up in the next pass, but it'll also lend a helping hand in keeping the white nice and even. I then followed it up with a pass of white primer. Now, white primer has the reputation of being speckly and grainy. To avoid this, you'll want to follow a few steps. First, shake your cans well. 45 seconds vigorously at the minimum. Second, don't spray when it's too hot, cold, or humid. These factors will change how the accelerant behaves. Too cold and it won't mix well with the paint and you'll end up spraying chunks. Too hot and your paint will semi-dry in the air before it hits the model, leaving you with a grainy finish. Too humid and the paint will be tacky for a lot longer than usual, giving any dust in the air plenty of time to settle on your mini and mess up your work. Number 3, keep your distance. 8 to 12 inches is the golden zone. Too far and you get speckling dust. Too close and you'll flood the model and get drips. And finally, try to achieve the results you want using the least amount of paint. Remember, we're still priming. We have a lot more paint to add. With our alien dry, he's ready for some color, starting with Zealot Yellow speed paint. And I'll need to thin this with a bit of contrast medium. In my experience, speed and contrast paints are nearly identical, so methods are pretty much interchangeable. And one thing that's absolutely true with both is that you get much more control with these paints when you thin them down. But you don't want to just use water or you'll end up breaking the emulsion of the paint. But doing an even 3-way split of water, medium, and paint gets me the flow properties I'm looking for while still acting like a contrast paint. The extra bonus is, not only does this even out the contrast staining, but it also gives you several extra minutes to work it before it starts to semi-dry. And with contrast paints, that extra work time can make a huge difference. After just 2 coats, the contrast did its job with an intense yellow while disappearing into the shadows. Now for a highlight with deflector shield. Now, a lot of times when contrast is used, it's meant to speed through painting, hence the name speed paint, but it could also be built upon. Just be sure to give it plenty of time to dry and use a light touch, as just a bit of water and agitation from a brush can reactivate the paint and start to mix with your new color. While here it won't be too noticeable, in situations like painting white over blue or purple, having a light hand will keep them white and not periwinkle. So with delicate strokes, I redefined the shadows where the contrast pooled and began to make an uneven but natural hard transition to be built upon in the next step. Mutation Green was loaded up for his back skin, so I had to do a bit of sleuthing to try to find any legit pictures of Amon from behind. The only thing that I could come up with was pictures of the official toys, and it's pretty simple flat green. But if I just use toys as reference, this is what layout would look like. Nothing too fancy going on here, just thin it down, spread it on. And when I get to that transition to the yellow, again, I'm using the tip of my brush as I slash out a rough but natural looking hard transition. The arms got the same treatment, and I strongly suggest that you put the arms in place to make sure that your transitions line up. I couldn't because I had them pinned, and I ended up having to pay for it later with a cleanup on the paint job. So take this as one of those times where you should follow what I say and not what I do. Oh, can't forget the markings on his little mushroom lip thing. This is a randomized natural edge. Don't overthink it. If you make it too even or perfect, it'll look off. So embrace a bit of chaos and don't attempt perfection. After that, he got a few dabs of flat red to define his eyes. I'm pretty sure these are the easiest eyes I've painted on this channel. Before I get started on Amanaman's accessories, I'd like to take a moment to thank my subscribers over on Patreon. Rents are getting higher and paychecks are getting thinner, and yet every month you all dig deep to find a few bucks to throw Waiya's way. And this week I would like to extend a special welcome to the latest name to be etched into the halls of greatness of the painting pantheon, Romeo G. They've been a long-time watcher and a frequent commentator here on the channel, and now they've joined the exclusive group of people that have reached out, thrown money at me, and said, Waiya, take this and keep doing what you're doing. If you would like to join the Painting Pantheon, you'll find a link to my Patreon in the description below. I also want to thank 3DX Files for sending over this little guy and becoming today's sponsor. They keep on putting out top tier sculpts, and I keep on painting them. So if you would like to get your hands on Amanaman here, be sure to check out their Patreon. You'll also find a link to that below in the description. And faster than you can say Nerf herder, you could have this little guy sitting on your shelf as well. But the galaxy waits for no man, and neither do projects. Let's get back to it. Up next to paint is his multi-head staff. Let's start with the wood, using dark earth, just a quick simple base over the pole. Just don't forget the little bit extra above the heads. Then a bit of skeletal bone took care of the skulls in short order. Simply avoiding the orbitals and leaving them black is usually the best choice here. The ambiguity of black lets the viewer fill in those blanks, and deep shadows always look more sinister. So, win-win. Next, a few drops of hardened carapace fills out the color of the tied up hair. And this also worked as a good color for his nails to finish off the main body while the staff dried. Speaking of which, it got a bit of medium gray for the wrappings. I thought about making these leather, but in the end decided it would blend into the hair and staff too much. so a generic gray here serves well for the detail to be noticeable. To shade the staff and skulls, a bit of light tone was perfect. I did end up going a bit heavier on the skulls than I'd like to, but so long as I let this dry, I can touch that up later. So while I wait, a bit of dark gunmetal on the blades will do just fine. Now with the wash dry, I can clean up the tops of the skulls. I still want a good shading around the draw, but the extra pooling that I missed needs to go. They don't need to be clean, just cleaner than this. If it ever looks like something dripped on your model that wasn't on purpose, you gotta fix it. Now for our buddy Jeff here, I wanted a desiccated body look, so I started with a base of hardened carapace, thinned down to nearly a wash. It needs to be this thin because I want to make sure that my undercoat is doing the heavy lifting for my highlights. I backed those up with a rough and uneven dry brush of dark earth. Followed by a bit of refinement with a detail brush and some khaki. These three colors are close enough that they blend really easy to give you a nice musty and decayed look. Finally, to tackle Amanaman's little corner of Hut's palace, I started with a quick base of dark earth, just so I wasn't painting over black. Then I gave it a heavy overbrush of khaki to establish a midtone. Followed by an all-over light tone wash. And finally, an all-over dry brush of skeletal bone for that windy, eroded, dusty Tatooine look. After that, I glued him up and called him done. And bang! Look at this little guy. He came out great. Leave it to Star Wars to have interesting creatures like this just hanging out in the background. And leave it to Star Wars fans to love the universe so much that even scenery characters like Amanaman here get a chance to step in the spotlight. But what do you all think? Did I capture the Star Wars feel? I certainly think I did. Hopefully this encourages you to pick up some paint, print this little guy out, and have a nice diorama to put on your desk. Once again, thank you to 3DX Files for providing this STL and being my sponsor today. And to Romeo G and any other Kingdom Death fans, the Screaming Antelope is coming. In the meantime, my next project just came off the printer and is ready to go. So I gotta get painting. As always, thank you for watching, stay creative, and always enjoy the process.